Hello, and on this edition of the Field Specialist Report, we're going to be talking about your effects in drinking and how much you should drink. So we'll hang in there. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to the Field Specialist Report. My name is Dwayne Rigsby. I got Dan Remley here with us. Dan, you were talking about being a little savvy about alcohol. If you do drink alcohol, give us a little bit what's going on here. What are we going to be talking about today?
Well, as you know, my specialization is in nutrition, and alcohol, actually, for many Americans, it contributes a substantial amount of calories, and so I want to talk about alcohol and health impacts. And so there's a lot of gravity to this topic. Alcoholism is a disease, and many people do suffer from alcoholism, but we're going to focus more on non-disease drinking patterns, such as binge drinking, drinking moderately, and how it might impact your health, both acutely and over time as well. And so we're going to talk a lot about, especially if you have a chronic disease like diabetes, how it might impact your blood sugars and other health outcomes. So
didn't really think about that, but yeah, it does, wouldn't it?
So you drink, Dwayne?
Well, I will say very, very occasionally. Maybe once or twice in a year, if that. My consistency of drinking, it would be like caffeine drinks, so Mountain Dew or things like that.
Well, they have alcohol caffeine drinks too.
Yeah, and that's not the greatest, is it?
Well, you know, it just depends on the drink.
Well, that's true.
Just like alcoholic beverages, there are healthier choices than others. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but I want to focus again on, we'll talk about the recommendations for alcohol consumption, and then the health implications, and then also how alcohol might impact weight, diabetes, hypertension, and diabetes, or heart disease, excuse me. So alcohol has been around for a long time. It's been around since the beginning of civilization. The ancient Egyptians would brew their own beer, for example. And also very prominent in the Middle Ages. And so doctors back then couldn't prescribe pain relievers like Tylenol. Can you imagine living in a period where they didn't have Tylenol or ibuprofen and that type of thing?
That would be very hard.
So they would prescribe alcohol for all kinds of maladies, and they actually thought it was a fountain of youth.
Really?
So alcohol was very important in the Middle Ages in terms of medicating and medications. So physicians would prescribe it for things like colds and fevers, snake bites, frosted toes, broken legs, and actually they'd use it for as a relaxant to relieve depression, tension, and thought it was really important for people that were hard-working laborers, which was pretty much everybody back in those days. Was used in a pain reliever during the Civil War, so soldiers would.
When you have a wound or something?
Yep, so doctors, surgeons would actually give their patients a shot of whiskey before they would do an amputation.
Wouldn't they also use it to maybe disinfect the wound as well?
Well,
so it kind of served multiple purposes sometimes?
They weren't really, I believe, I'm not a historian, but I believe in those days they didn't understand the germ theory yet, so it was seen more as a pain reliever. Yep. So I want to talk about the recommendation for alcohol consumption. So it's different. The guidelines are different between women and men. So if you're a woman, the guideline is no more than 1 drink per day, and for men, it's 2 drinks. And so now I want to define actually what a drink is. And so a drink is considered a 12-ounce beer, or 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of distilled spirit like your whiskey or vodka. So it's like straight alcohol, 80 proof. So a lot of people would think, hey, here's a wine glass here. This is a drink. Well,
depending on what you put in it.
Well, yeah, sure. So if you're drinking wine out of this wine glass, you say, I'm just going to have 1 drink of wine, and I'll be okay. Let me show you what 5 ounces actually looks like this is about 3/4 of a cup. So if I fill this up, it'll be 6 ounces, but this is about 5. Now let's see if I can do this without spilling, so it might get a little wet here. So this is about 5 ounces of wine. That's 1 drink of wine. So if I fill this up,
oh yeah, that's
going to be
2
about
plus
that's
3.
that's about 2.5 servings of wine. That's quite a bit of calories.
Wow.
And so it's really important to think about serving sizes when you're thinking about the recommendations. So this is 1 serving of 1 drink. So that's the recommendation for women. 2 servings would be for men. So if I drink this whole glass, I'd have my 2 servings in right there. 12 ounces of beer is a serving. And then for whiskey and distilled spirits, that's about 1/4 of this. That's 1 shot.
Wow.
So these are all kind of calorie equivalents.
Yeah.
So wine has far more calories per ounce than beer. Your distilled spirits have almost twice as much as the wine too, or more than that. So distilled spirits have the most calories per serving. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
Interesting.
Now, you mentioned that you're an occasional drinker, and there's different drinking patterns that I want to talk about. So we have the occasional seldom, and so this is where you might drink, 1 or 2 glasses, maybe once or twice a week. And this is kind of what I do. I might have a few on the weekends, but maybe on Friday night I might have a couple, and maybe a couple on Saturday night. So that's an occasional seldom. And then there's the regular moderate, and so this is where we see this a lot in Europe. People having a glass of wine at every dinner or something like that. My mom has a beer, before every time she eats dinner. So that's kind of maybe 1 or 2 servings, 1 for men, 2 for men, 1 for a woman on a regular basis throughout the week. That's kind of more of a regular moderate. And then there's binge drinking, and so binge drinking is defined by having 5 drinks or more within a 2-hour period for men, and then 4 drinks or more within a 2-hour period for women. So binge drinking is not necessarily alcoholism. It can lead to alcoholism because it's not chemically dependent. Alcoholism is when you're chemically dependent on alcohol. And so when you stop drinking alcohol, you have withdrawal symptoms.
Gotcha.
Just some quick statistics on binge drinking, because this is a real problem in America today. 1 out of 6 adults binge drinks about 4 times per month, consuming 8 drinks on average per binge drink. And so binge drinking is more common amongst younger adults between the ages of 18 and 34. It's actually more common in higher income households of $75,000 or more. It's more common in men than women. And then college, it's a big problem, of course, in colleges. So 70% of binge drinking episodes involve adults ages 26 or older, but it is very common in college-age students as well. Some other statistics here. Binge drinkers are 14 times more likely to report alcohol-impaired driving, so much more likely to drive while impaired than non-binge drinkers. And then about 90% of the alcohol consumed by youth under the age of 21, so again, it's getting to that college age there, in the United States is in the form of binge drinking. So very prevalent in high school and college. But binge drinking is a big problem for many reasons. And I want to talk a little bit about the physiology of alcohol consumption and what it can do, kind of how it's used in our bodies, how it's metabolized. So alcohol is produced by, you mix yeast and sugars and starches, and the yeast breaks down the sugar and makes carbon dioxide and alcohol. The chemical name is ethyl alcohol. It's also known as ethanol. So alcohol affects almost every organ and tissue in our body. It's primarily metabolized in our liver. So our liver has the enzymes such as alcohol dehydrogenase that metabolizes, breaks down the alcohol. But we only have a limited supply of enzymes in our bodies. And so alcohol is digested and absorbed and metabolized very slowly. So it circulates throughout our body and affects things like our brain. And so that's why you feel drunk or relaxed. It actually lowers blood pressure, at least initially. So it relaxes the heart a little bit. And it dilates the arteries, and so that's why if you drink whiskey or something like that, you get that kind of that warm feeling.
Yeah.
And so maybe, remember, I just can relate to the old cartoons back in the 70s and 80s where the St. Bernard would run up to Bugs Bunny in the snow and have a little, like a flask of whiskey. Yeah. So he'd give Bugs Bunny the whiskey. To warm him up.
I remember that.
I don't know if that was common in Alaska or the climate.
Yeah, who knows? But
so yeah, you don't want to drink alcohol if you're cold because it's a sort of a false sense of feeling warm, but it's actually what's happening is it's dilating your arteries, and so you get that feeling. But actually, it's it can, if you're drinking in the cold, that can lead to a lot of problems. So it can impact your pancreas and your liver as well. We'll talk more about that, how that could be important for somebody with diabetes.
Okay.
Some quick facts about nutritional content of many alcoholic beverages. Manufacturers are not required to provide nutrition information on the on label. They're not required to have food labels or nutrition information on the alcoholic products. You'll see the beer here. You don't see any.
Right, you don't see any kind of.
Even
labels.
If you look at the package, if I look at the carton it comes in or the box, I can't find the nutrition information.
Right, it doesn't have all the sodium and all that, everything that's in it.
It does not. And the reason is that alcohol is not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. It's regulated by the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And so they're not required to have the nutrition information. And so if you're interested in nutrition information, you have to go online and get it. And it's pretty hard sometimes, especially with these some of these newer products out there to find
they may not supply it,
nutrition information. So let's talk a little bit about nutrition information. And you might have sometimes alcoholic beverages will be labeled as light or ultra, for example. And so those products are generally a little bit lower in calories and carbohydrates. However, it's not by much too, so it can be that can be helpful. So there are healthier choices. Alcohol, it does have 7 calories per gram, and that's not quite as high as fat. Fat has about 9 calories per gram. Carbohydrates and protein have about half that much, so about 4 calories per gram. It does have some nutrients, so you've got protein, you've got carbohydrates, you've got some B vitamins, B12, folate, some minerals like selenium. Wine has some phytochemicals in it, for example. A lot of alcoholic products do have phytochemicals, such as phenols, which are thought to be protective against heart disease and that type of thing.
Okay.
But the calorie and carbohydrate contents do vary by the alcoholic beverages. For sure. So if here's a little quiz here. Drinking 2 regular beers would account for the same number of calories as eating which of the following? Double hamburger, roast beef sandwich, 2 slices of cheese pizza, any of the above. What do you think? Or none of the above?
I'm going to say all of the above.
That's right, all of the above. So 1 beer is about equivalent to a slice of pizza.
Isn't that interesting?
Yep, I drink 2 of these, 2 slices of pizza.
2 slices of pizza.
So that's important to think about. If you're on a diet and you're having a piece of pizza and you drink a couple beers before the pizza.
Usually you have the pizza and the beer.
Yes.
So that's not good, is it?
And also if you drink before you eat, it sort of increases your appetite too. So the research says that if you drink before you eat, you consume 20% more calories than what you normally would. So you're really, and that's why if you drink before you eat, you're on a regular basis that could contribute to weight gain. Yep. So the beer belly, right?
Yeah.
That we all, as men, we're trying to avoid.
Absolutely.
So is alcohol good for me? Do we know? I mean, we probably have heard, having a couple drinks of wine and it's good for heart disease. There are some large population studies, especially that have been done in Europe, that have shown that moderate drinking can improve or reduce your risk for heart disease and some types of cancers and whatnot. But this is very kind of controversial. Most of the research has found that alcohol has more detrimental health outcomes for us. And so, especially along the lines of accidents and car crashes and things like that. But alcohol has also been linked to cancers, many types of cancers, especially in the throat and the stomach.
Really?
And so it's more, the health research on cancer is, I would say, probably more negative than positive. Unfortunately, we can't do these. The gold standard is randomized trials. So you put half your people in the drinking group and half in the non-drinking, and follow more. Well, you can't do that because it's unethical. And
exactly.
You can't just say, Dwayne, you don't drink, and so we're going to put you in the drinking group, get you drinking. That would be tough to pass through the IRB.
Yeah, you're right.
So the research on this is somewhat limited. We don't know the long term, but we know there's a lot of research suggesting that there are a lot of problems with alcohol consumption, not only on cancers but also chronic disease like heart disease. So here's another little quiz here, and you just tell me if you think it's true or false.
True or false? Okay.
Okay. So beers with higher alcohol content usually have about the same number of calories as those with lower alcohol content.
I'll say false.
That's actually right.
Okay.
So beers with higher alcohol content have more calories because alcohol is like 7 grams per 7 calories per gram. So all light beers have 100 calories or less. What would you say, true or false?
I'll say false.
That's false.
Yeah.
Generally, they're around 100 to 130 calories per serving, per 12-ounce serving. But and then your regular beers are going to have about 150 to 200.
Yeah.
Yep. So beer is fat-free. True or false?
Well, I'm going to say that's false.
That is true. Beer and wine are fat-free.
So they're fat-free, but they'll still give you calories.
They still give you calories.
So that's interesting.
Yep. Okay. And those calories can be converted to fat, too.
Okay. Converted to fat.
So a beer's label must disclose calorie content if it's labeled light or light.
What
do you think?
False.
That's false, right? So it gets back
so we
to
don't get the label
right.
again.
Exactly.
So even though they call it light, it could be just maybe a few calories or whatever.
It could be, the difference between a light and a regular beer, for example, it might be 20 calories. Or it could be as much as 100. It just depends on the product. So you really, and that's what gets back to if you're on a calorie diet, you really got to look at the nutrition information, especially if you're on a meal plan or that type of thing. So
big could be a big problem.
Yep. So next slide is Pints and Pizzas. There's a restaurant, isn't there? A Pints and Pizzas restaurant out there. So and I kind of made the analogy: one 12-ounce beer is equivalent to a slice of pizza, right? So if a light beer is about 2/3 of a slice of pizza, it's 9.2 calories per ounce, around 110. That's on average. But again, they can vary from 100 to 130. Your regular beers are going to be a little bit more.
Yep.
Hard ciders like the Angry Orchard and those types of things, they're going to have around 18 calories per ounce, a little bit more than your regular beers.
Okay.
12 ounces of hard ciders would be about 1.5 slices of pizza. Now, wine has about double the amount of calories than beer. That's why the serving of wine is about half of what a beer serving is. So double the calories. If you drink 12 ounces of wine, that's like about 2 servings. That's going to be about 330 calories, equivalent to about 2 pieces of pizza.
Wow.
A margarita, now we're getting into the high calorie types of things.
Yeah.
And 46 calories per ounce, that's almost equivalent to about 3 beer servings. So if I drink 12 ounces of a margarita, that's 4 slices of pizza.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Wow.
Now, distilled spirit, like an 80 proof whiskey, these are calorie bombs, right? So it's straight alcohol, 64 calories per ounce. If I drink 12 ounces of whiskey, that's quite a bit. That would probably put me. I'd be hurting.
You'd be sleeping.
That's equivalent to 5 slices of pizza.
That's almost the whole pizza.
Yes.
Wow.
So your hard alcohol is going to really add up those calories.
Interesting.
So let's look at diabetes and alcohol. We just have a few minutes here. Diabetes can lower blood sugars actually because it inhibits hepatic glucose.
Okay.
So it affects those your kind of your endocrine system, and so that can be a problem for people with diabetes. And so if you're counting carbohydrates, the American Diabetes Association recommends not counting alcoholic carbohydrates unless you're drinking like those sweetened alcoholic beverages, like those fruity beers and that type of thing.
Okay.
We talked about the margaritas, that would kind of fall into that category. Very important that people with diabetes especially wear an ID if they're going to be out drinking, especially if they're younger. And it's important to drink with food as well, so that you can avoid, you kind of know what you're, so if you have a low blood sugar, you'll be able to recognize that, and you're not going to. So there are, depending on the beer choice or the alcoholic beverage, there's various carbohydrate amounts. The light beers are going to have the least amount of carbohydrates, so 12 ounces is going to have about 6 grams of carbohydrate. A regular beer is going to be about double that much.
Yeah.
Dark beers are going to be, dark and craft beers have about 14 to 16 grams of carbohydrate per. It's not a lot. It's not too bad. So that's equivalent to about 4 teaspoons of sugar. And you get up to your flavored beers, you're looking at about 45 grams of carbohydrate. So this is why the dietitians say that if you have diabetes, you really have to be mindful if you're going to be drinking these flavored beers or margaritas or those types of things. So if I drink a 12-ounce flavored beer, fruit beer, I'm pretty much putting 11 teaspoons of sugar into my body. So,
wow, that is amazing. I never really thought about it that way, and especially if you're a person that has diabetes or maybe on the verge of.
Right, pre-diabetes.
Yeah, that's probably a huge problem.
So you're putting in a lot of calories too, which is a.
I would say that's probably a thing that a lot of the public doesn't know or doesn't realize.
Right, right. So you go out to eat, you get a big cup or a serving. Yeah. That's a lot of calories. Yeah. Huh. Wine is a lot higher in carbohydrates. So if I drink, that's, again, the calories can add out. Now, we talked about whiskey being very high in calories, but actually zero carbohydrates. It's all alcohol. That's where all your calories are coming from.
Wow. Okay.
So, a person with diabetes could drink whiskey and it probably won't raise their blood sugar, but the challenge right there is that if I drink too much, it's easy to do with whiskey, right? Because you don't need
so much, so little, I guess.
So you could have, a low blood sugar, and that's where you have to be careful. Okay. So some of the long-term consequences of alcohol consumption could be is hypertension. And now we talked about initially it relaxes the heart, but over time, if you binge drink a lot, you could be getting into situations where you develop hypertension, heart disease, those types of things. And then the problems with consuming too many calories, and it accumulates in men, it accumulates in the waist, and women in the hips, and the larger your waist size, that's a risk factor for heart disease.
Gotcha.
So over time, binge drinking large amounts of alcohol could lead to some of these chronic diseases. We also know that alcohol increases triglycerides and bad cholesterol and weakens the heart muscles and arterial walls. So this causes a lot of problems as well, and that leads to heart disease. So let's talk about some things that you can do. I've been kind of negative here, and certainly I'm a drinker. You can drink alcohol safely. It can be it can be sort of a social lubricant, at times, and many people do use alcohol safely and are helpful about their choices. And so, some strategies for making healthy choices. Choosing light beers or wine, but stick with the recommendations. So again, one drink for women and 2 drinks for men, and then
that's a day.
Yes, per day. Gotcha. Yep. And so, but if you're not going to be drinking a lot, just drink slowly and really appreciate the flavor and the feeling and we have so many wonderful craft beers out there that in Brad Bergerford here, he has he had the hops workshop here and had different beer varieties. I mean, really appreciate just the different flavors. Yep. And then if you're going to consume the margaritas, choose those sugar-free ingredients if you can. With the mixed drinks. And then also it's recommended to drink during and after meals, but not before. And that's because alcohol does increase your appetite. And so you get the calories with your alcohol, but on top of that, you're going to be eating more as well. Right. And so that could be a problem.
Okay.
So, anyway, anything? Would you do anything differently after this discussion?
Yeah. I mean, I guess what you've described is obviously the distilled or the straight whiskey is probably the worst for you, as in that. But I know a lot of people use that. But also, the craft beers and things have become very popular. Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, that seems to be bad for you as well, because it's adding more of that flavoring and more calories, right?
It can, but again, it's just if you stick with the recommendations and drink your beverages slowly and you really appreciate the flavors and that, but you'll be okay.
You'll be okay.
Yep.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, that's what you've told us is great information, and especially about the one drink and two drinks. I didn't even realize that a man can have two drinks, and there's always the myth that I've heard. Well, if you're a big person, you can have more. Is that really just to be the intoxicated part?
Well, that's actually true. So gender affects your the metabolism, and so, but size as well. Yeah. And so gender and size, and actually ethnicity too. So certain ethnic groups metabolize alcohol a bit differently. So, for example, Native Americans might not process alcohol as quickly as Caucasians.
Oh, okay.
So different ethnic groups metabolize a little differently. So gender, ethnicity, and then your body weight will affect how quickly alcohol can be metabolized. Okay. So if you're a little bigger, you could probably have a little bit more probably,
But on average, we'll stay with those two.
Yes.
Two is your limit for a day.
Right.
And that's not per hour, that's a day.
Right.
24 hours difference. Right. So, hey, Dan, this has been real great information, and I think we could probably keep going, but we're about out of time. Is there any last things that we should be being cautious about with this?
Well, one thing with the beers is that a lot of beer varieties have a lot more alcohol now. There's 8%, maybe these high gravity types of products. And so when we're talking about serving sizes, if you're looking at a 10% alcohol by volume content of beer, you have a lot more calories. And so, that's probably about a 6-ounce serving is, it's about a serving of those products. So read your labels.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. And thanks for watching. We'll be back again on the Field Specialist Report soon.